How do I get my spouse to understand how it makes me feel when they stay out until 2 o'clock in the morning? This was a comment I recently read on one of the YouTube videos, probably in the last week and a half or so. And I did have an immediate answer flash in my head, but I didn't answer this question because the immediate answer that flashed in my head, I knew was if I just wrote it super direct, it was gonna sound super snarky, and this was a fella concerned about his wife who was already enough pain, he didn't need me to be snarky. But I could have said it without being snarky, but then it would've been like an entire session, which you can't do in a comment section. But what I could do is talk about it to you guys, because I bet there's a lot of you watching who have a very similar problem. You have a spouse who has an addiction to something, doesn't matter what, and it's as if your feelings don't matter. No matter how much you try to communicate it, when you've been mad and said it, you've been nice and said it, you've begged and pleaded and threatened, you've done all the things, and they just don't even seem to care about how all of their behaviors impact you. So that's what we're going to talk about on this video. If that applies to you, put the little hand emoji in the comments and let me know, hey, yeah, this is for me. I want my spouse to start to care and listen to how I feel about what is going on with them. All right, y'all ready for the snarky answer? The snarky answer is you don't. But don't worry, I am gonna solve this problem for you. But that question was really the wrong question, because the question is framed, how do I get my wife, it was wife in the question, how do I get my wife to understand how I feel about her staying out 2 o'clock in the morning? That's not really what the person was really wanting, right? What the person really wants is for the wife to stop staying out till 2 o'clock in the morning. And the misconception here is that if I can get my wife to understand how I feel about it, then she would stop. But that is inaccurate. We will talk about why that is. Is it because the wife is an evil, horrible person who never did care about this person and just married him to take advantage of him in the first place? I mean, maybe, but not necessarily. When someone has an addiction, you're not playing on the same field as you were initially before that addiction. The brain doesn't work the same way. And if you're trying to get through to someone who has an addiction by expressing your feelings and crying and whining and begging and threatening, it's the least effective thing that you can do. In fact, expressing your feelings about it is pretty much ineffective, except under one circumstance. So keep listening, and I'll tell you what that one circumstance is. What you really gotta do, what you really want, is for them to stop the daggone hurtful behaviors, right? And in order to get them to stop the daggone hurtful behaviors, you gotta get them to address their addiction. And in order to get them to do that, it's not gonna be because of your feelings. It is going to be because of their feelings. So a better question might be, how do I get my alcoholic spouse, my addict spouse, partner, child, whoever, to understand their feelings? Because deep down inside, they're miserable, but they don't see a better solution. So it's not about trying to get someone to see your perspective. It's about trying to get someone to see their perspective much more clearly, because they're not seeing the situation clearly. They're trapped somehow in a cycle, and whatever addict behavior, substance, whatever it is, initially solved some kind of problem for them, but has gotten to the point that the addict behavior, substance, whatever it is now worsening the original problem, but it is the only time they get any relief from whatever it is they're running from. And I'm not necessarily saying that they have like super childhood trauma or something. I'm just saying like the addiction itself creates a wound, an anxiety, a difficulty that they then need relief from. So it kind of sort of self-fulfills itself here. And so they don't see a very easy way out, and they cling on to it like it's their lifeline, because it is their lifeline. And so the more you directly come at them trying to like let go of it, in my mind, it's almost like seeing like a little kid with like their binky, like their like blankie that they're holding on to, which is like, they've held on to it way too long. It's like nasty and gross. It has like plants growing off of it or something. And you're like, I think it's time to let go. But if you try to go and snatch it up, it's not gonna go well, right? You have to, like, convince the person that life will be better without it. And there are some ways to do that, and the ways that you do that is to create a safe enough environment for them to get real honest with themselves, because the work that they're gonna have to do, the picture they're gonna have to look at isn't pleasant. They're gonna have to really look at some things about themselves that they don't like. They don't wanna look at it, and it's an ugly picture, and they're ashamed of, and we all have things like that, and it's like you're asking them to not only just look at these things, but acknowledge these things, and then dig out of this ginormous hole that they've, um, built for themselves, all while they're in mega trouble and everyone around them is mad at them and yelling at them and screaming at them and doesn't trust them. So it's a lot of work ahead. And in order to get somebody in a position where they're gonna be willing to do that work, the best thing you can do is soften it up for them a little bit. Make it slightly more appealing to come out of this hole. Make it slightly more appealing to give up the binky, right? If you give up this binky, you're gonna have this over here instead. Make the offer appealing. If the I'm not even gonna say if, because almost always, not always, but almost always, the situation is you as the family member have been so mad at them for so long, not only do they not care how you feel, they're probably in a position, they may not say this, some of them will say it, some of them won't, but they most of them think it, is that they're staying out 2 in the morning just to make you upset on purpose. So trying to express to them how you feel about it, it's not gonna help your case any, because whether, I'm not saying that perspective is accurate, but I'm saying that is what their perspective is. You're trying to control me, you're always negative, I'm never good enough for you. This is their storyline, right? Like you just want to keep me in the house, you're just jealous, you're just controlling. This would be the storyline. And so it's kind of like, why in this person's mind, it's like, I don't care about your feelings because you've been so mad at me for so long. And in their mind, you haven't treated them well in so long. I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm just trying to help you understand the way they're viewing it. Okay, so it's almost like, why would they care? Now, I told you earlier that I would tell you there is one situation where you can make them care. And in order to do that, you have to build the trust and credibility that I'm always talking about. Once you repair that relationship with your loved one, once you build that trust back, and the way you build that trust back is to help them understand that you understand. And you don't get that by talking about your feelings, you get that by talking about their feelings. Because if you can get them to communicate with you what's really going on inside, and you can accurately mirror, label, reflect these things back to them, they're going to feel like, wow, you really get me. And then if you throw some positive reinforcement, sprinkle some of that in there every now and then, they're going to like being around you a little more because they're going to want some more of that positive reinforcement, because it's probably the only place other than the addiction where they get a little dopamine, a little good brain chemicals going on. And so once you have this combination where you have they want to be around you because they trust you, they feel like you understand them, they feel validated by you. Guess what? Then they care what you think, and caring what you think is probably more important than caring how you feel, because it's what you think about this the where the solution to the problem is a lot of times. And so you have to get a person to build enough credibility so that when you offer a solution to someone, they believe you, they trust you, they feel like, yes, that does sound like a good solution because they really understand my situation, they've taken into account all my, like, specific things. um, and you can only do that over time by building that trust and credibility, by using the skills that we teach you right here on this channel, by using the skills definitely that we teach in the invisible intervention. It's sort of like putting in the time, building the relationship. It is exactly 100,000% exactly what counselors do. We don't have a superpower. That's the only thing we got. Is only superpower we got is to make someone feel heard and understood, right? It's easy to see what someone's problem is from the outside. You don't have to be trained clinical professional for that. Anybody can do that. Anybody can look at someone else's problem and see what the problem is and what the solution is. but it's not easy to get another person to see what their problem is and get them willing to pursue the solution. You have to do these other things that we teach you in the invisible intervention on this class that I talk about on these lives every Thursday to make that happen. That's the only thing we do. People always ask me like, "Well, don't you worry, these these addicts and these alcoholics, they're gonna lie to you, they're gonna this, they're gonna that." And I'm like, "Not really." Well, for one, usually when my other counselor's talking to the family member, so I'm usually getting the truth dripped in, so I usually kinda know already. But 2, it's not up to me to call out every single lie. That's not really my job. My job is to help them feel heard and understood. Now, it is my job to kinda know what's really going on big picture wise. Counselors can get themselves in big trouble when they, like, literally don't know what's going on big picture wise. Is it important that I know every single thing that they did, every lie that they told, every action over the week? No, not really. I do have to know what direction to lead this person in, but I would never start to lead a person in that direction until they knew that I knew. They knew that I understand them and all the uniqueness about their situation. So once you get to a point where you're trying to offer a solution to someone, like let's say you're trying to get them to go to treatment, if you've listened to them long enough and you can express empathy for the situation and you can say, I know you have to still be able to check your emails for work because you're, I wouldn't say it like this, but like a fancy executive and you can't just miss work. So, so I've found you a program that does that. So listen to what they have to say, or at least sort of line up something that is matches with who they are that's going to make it more appealing. Make it more appealing to come out of the deep dark shell, the hole that they're in, not less appealing. And that's really hard because your emotions are going crazy. You got to get strategic, not emotional. I this happens less often than it used to happen, but it still happens. A lot of times people will work forever to get, months, years sometimes to get their person to come talk to a counselor. And sometimes that happens with you guys. You work, you do other things, you get your person to come like talk to me, or it doesn't have to be me. This could be anyone, but the ones that come talk to me. And if you're still at home yelling, screaming, threatening, being upset, not that you don't have the right to, that's definitely a valid feeling, then I can't get anywhere with them, and then I get frustrated. I'm like, "What do you guys want me to do?" Like, they're so miserable, like, all they talk about is how horrible their mama is, their husband is, or whoever it is, and we can't get anywhere past that, and I'm thinking, "Okay, family member over there, you're sabotaging me. Why are you bringing me," and usually family members want paying me too, so I'm like, "Why are you paying me? Fix this problem because I need you to help me do this." And you've gotta make it appealing to come out from underneath this anesthesia, I guess is what I might call it, that they're under. Um, those of you who are watching live, we're going to take some questions and comments here in just a minute. And I am going to put the link up here if somebody wants to hop on and talk about this situation with me live. But remember, you are live. This is public. Right now as we speak, there's 100 people watching, and there will be probably 1,000 by the end of the day. So don't get on here and say something that you don't want out there. I'll put the link up for those of you who might want to hop on here for a minute and talk to me about your situation. Here it is. And while we do that and while we wait, I will remind you guys there are resources in the description. If you're looking for, if you or your loved one is ready to get some help in recovery coaching, we offer our strengths-based recovery coaching. You can do it like the 1 month or the 3 month, whichever one you want. But it's all based on like what's working right about you. Let's move you in the right direction. It's not a whole tear you down program. It's a build you up and pull you out of this kind of program. That link's in the description. Or the invisible intervention, if you want to know how to do these things I'm talking about, how to like use all these counselor skills, because maybe you can't get your person to see the counselor and you're the only one there, you're the front line. So you're going to have to do the thing that I would do because you can't get them to me. If you want to learn that, you want to look at the invisible intervention. And if you need some help applying all that stuff along the way, you want to look at our family membership program where you can get like the weekly group coaching from Kim and Campbell, and they can help you sort of like apply and pull apart the pieces and figure out how all these things fit for you exactly. All right, if you wanna be on live, I've put the link in the description in the chat, I mean. It's a StreamYard link, so you can click that, and while we wait, and if not, I'm gonna take some questions, comments, concerns over here in the chat. Let's see. Here's a comment from, Pony Hallie says, "I feel like giving up and like there will be an end of marriage down the line. He said the ideal he said the idea of getting retired." Is there more to that? I feel like maybe there's more, 'cause it feels a little incomplete. Let's move to Eric. Eric says, "If we, the family member, don't have addiction, is it in bad taste to responsibly consume alcohol with your loved one who abuses alcohol from time to time?" This is a great question. I'm glad you're asking this, Eric. Um, if your person is not actively trying to stop drinking, as in they are still drinking, um, then I probably wouldn't change your behavior as far as your own drinking around them, because sometimes actually, if they know that you think they have a problem with drinking and they know that you drink and now all of a sudden you're not drinking, they almost see it as like a dig or an insult or a judgment. It's like, "Oh, you think you're better than me or something," you know? It doesn't feel good. So, if they're still actively drinking, I don't know that I would curtail your behavior. If they are trying to stop drinking or they're in early recovery, then I probably would curtail it. Most people who have some time under their belt and they've been sober for a while, it won't bother them if you have a few drinks. But it definitely bothers them if you're getting, like, super intoxicated, and I do have a fair amount of clients who get very frustrated because their spouse continues to drink, and it's like now they're dealing with a spouse that's drunk, and not only is it, like, a trigger because it makes them wanna drink, but it's a trigger because it's like now they're dealing with the intoxicated spouse, and I know you're thinking, "Well, that's your payback," but I'm just telling you, if you want them to stay sober, I do think you should curtail it back. It doesn't mean you can't drink at all, but I wouldn't have it in the house, and I wouldn't drink to excess in front of them if they're trying not to. Let's see. Peggy is asking how to get through to her son when he's in psychosis. He's hard to deal with. To be honest, Peggy, there's not a lot you can do to get through to someone in psychosis. I do have a video or two on this channel that I address that specifically. But when someone is in delusion, you have to deal with the psychosis before the addiction. It's one of the only times where you should deal with the mental health thing before the addiction. And you can't talk someone out of a delusion. You can't, like, get them to be rational or present evidence. In fact, the more you do that, the worse that it gets. So the goal is to figure out how to either get them in treatment or sidestep it until it clears. Um, so you wanna try to not engage with them too much about the psychosis, because the more they talk about it, the more entrenched and deeper the delusion gets. Let's see here. This is the rest of this question I was looking at earlier. Pony Hallie says, "My husband said his idea of only being in bed, watching TikTok, and drinking all day, doing nothing after he's retired makes him happy, although he knows it's not good for him. I don't want that for me." Um, I hear your frustration. You're thinking, "Dude, that's not how I wanna spend the rest of my life." Part of the thing that's going on here is that when you're that far into an addiction, you lose the ability to experience joy and happiness from other things. So the idea of doing, like, regular things that maybe used to make them happy or that they would enjoy, don't really make them happy anymore, because it's because of the chemical imbalance. It's because of the dopamines and the serotonins and all the brain stuff, is they don't really experience joy from those things. So that's why they don't like to do them anymore. It's like they don't want to engage in activities that don't involve the substance, because literally it can't be fun for them anymore. And so the thing is to get them to see that actually life could be a lot funner. They could actually start to enjoy things again. It's hard to convince people of that when they're in the middle of it. Like, they just don't believe you, because their experience of being sober is, like, either painful because they're in withdrawal, or at minimum it's boring. So they don't believe you. And So they have to get at least past 30 days to start to, like, feel motivated and enjoy things again, so that's why that's happening. Let's see, Jennifer has a question here. How do you respond when the answer they give you to many things is, "Well, I'm an alcoholic, so." Is there more? I think it looks like there's dots there. Basically, you're saying that they just own the fact that they're an alcoholic. I do think it's harder to deal with someone who who knows they have a problem and is kind of in this, like, "I don't care" attitude, and they just own it. I think it's a lot harder to deal with someone in that state than it is to deal with someone in denial, because denial will clear, it can clear, and there are methods for that. Um, what you're gonna wanna have to get them to see, I think, eventually is like I was telling the viewer right before you, is that actually they probably life could be happier without it, and that might be difficult, but also you have to make the decision. You might have to say, "Okay, you made the decision you're an alcoholic," but you can Jennifer, you can make a decision about whether or not you want to spend the rest of your life with an alcoholic, because the truth of it is they cannot care about you the same. They cannot love you the same, and I know I'm probably gonna get, like, a bunch of comments about that. Have videos about that where I explain it, but their primary relationship and loyalty is to the addiction because it has to be, not because they're bad, but because it has to be, and there's just not much left over for you. And so, if the person is to the point where they totally know it and they're just owning it and they realize exactly how much it hurts you and they just don't care, then that may be a situation where you have to step back and do something different with yourself, whether that's detach and just go on with your life, or move detached from that relationship. Um, let's see here. How are ways to validate our addict? Um, Look at any you can validate any positive behavior that's in the right direction. It doesn't always have to be about the addiction. In fact, it really shouldn't be about the addiction. Really, your conversation should be rarely about the addiction, but about who they are as a person, about their intentions, about their talent, skills, the same way you would validate any son. Any, son, wife, husband, daughter, brother, whoever this person is for you. It's not any different. You don't have to validate their bad behaviors just related to the addiction, but you can validate anything else that's positive, going on, and that will get that dopamine drip. That will help them like being around you because you make them feel good about themselves. Same way the drug makes them feel good about themselves. Now you have the power to make them feel good about themselves, and now you can compete a little bit with the drug. Let's see. More questions, more questions. How do you help them make the association between their addiction and the natural consequences? Even if he is not making me the bad guy, my spouse tends to blame other things and other people. Thank you. Great question. Uh, if you're not the bad guy, if you're gotten out of that role, they can still blame other things like bosses, politics, the country, the environment, anything, whatever, kids, whatever. Um, and they may do that to some degree, but deep down, they actually usually do know that whatever the addictive behavior is causing them problems. They may not be aware of the full extent that they're as miserable as they are because of the addiction, but they're aware more than they let on to you about that. And the reason I know this is because, after like 20 something years of talking to people with addictions, I've rarely met one that didn't know it at all and didn't care at all. Like, if you once you get them to feel safe enough, they do know that it's causing them problems in a lot of ways, and they do actually feel bad about it, and they do wanna stop, but they feel trapped, or they feel like there's not a better solution, or sometimes they feel like, "Okay, yeah, I've got a problem, but it's not that bad, it's not causing that much stuff," but they do know on some level, but they won't always tell it to you. The worst one with that is if they're addicted to weed. Sometimes they really don't make the connection, and that can be harder. But other than that, they usually do know. CCV says, I have expressed a lot of anger and snark in the past, and I'm now working hard to be empathetic and supportive while allowing natural consequences. Relapses keep happening. Hopeless. No. Okay, first of all, nice work. I am so proud of you. Um, when you are being empathetic and allowing those natural consequences, you want the problems to happen because that's the only way to get them fully out of denial. You want them to figure out that they cannot manage it. If relapses are still happening, it's probably because they're thinking like maybe there's still a loophole out there. Maybe if I'm sober long enough and I reset my system, then I can use normally or something like that. And so you don't want to stand in the way. You don't want to like stand in the way of them learning that lesson. I think the faster the better. So don't think that just because they're still drinking and using, like you're using these skills, don't make them stop the addiction. You're using these skills that I teach you guys, um, get you out of the bad guy role, which then allows them to see the problem for itself. And you don't want to slow the problem down when you're in that state. So it's just a different way of looking at it. But congrats on changing it. And the fact that you're saying relapses keep happening makes me know that your techniques are working because it makes me know that they actually have periods of sobriety and periods where they're trying to stop. So it's working. Um, is red, flushed face, itchy skin, taking Tums constantly a sign of liver damage? Thank you. I'm not 100% sure if it's a sign of liver damage, but those are definitely signs of of a problem, like when you drink too much and stuff like that. So it would make me think there probably, yeah, could be liver damage. But I'm not for sure if it's that, but it's a sign that the if I'm assuming it's alcohol is causing problems for sure medically. Brittany says, what are some considerations for early recovery? My family member is no longer in denial and ready to do the work. That's fantastic. I love it. This makes me excited. Um, I would probably give you a better answer, Brittany, if you'd ask me a more specific question. Um, because considerations for early recovery is so broad, I'm not exactly sure how to address that. My first instinct is to say to think about your loved one and their personality, their likes, their dislikes, who they get along with, what kind of, like, help might be helpful to them? Who would they respond to? What kind of situation would they work best in? And kind of, like, help them customize a plan for themselves so that they have a good experience with it, because above and beyond anything else, when people come to see me, my main goal isn't to make them be sober forever. My main goal is to make sure they have a good experience dealing with me. So that firstly, so that they keep coming back and we can eventually figure this problem out. And secondly, if it's however long down the road and the problem comes back, they're not gonna resist going to get some help because they had a good experience with it. So you wanna make sure that if they're gonna get some help, that they have a good experience with that help. At least hopefully that's what will happen. Nancy says, grandsons came to live with me and the addicted child. I need to evict her to not expose them to her drinking and behavior. How do I show understanding while I'm going through the eviction process? I think those are two contradictory goals. I mean, you can do it on some level. You can say, I know this is hard, but I'm still doing it anyway. So you can express the empathy, but I don't think that's going to override the fact that you're evicting them. But what you're having to do, Nancy, is you're having to make the decision where to put your energy, and you're putting it toward your grandsons, and that's what you should do. So you can't always win every single battle, and when it's safety and there are kids involved, you deal with that. You win that battle, and that's what you're doing. So you're doing the right thing. There's probably not a lot you can do to make your loved one understand the fact that you're evicting them. Let's see here. Eric says, just finished Beyond Addiction. For those of you who don't know, that's a book where you can read about the craft method. It's very helpful. Looking for the next step, invisible intervention, membership, or weekly group sessions. If you are just finished the book, then you really probably understand pretty well the craft method, which a lot of the current visible intervention talks about the craft method, so I think it would go nicely and pair nicely. I've been working pretty fast and furious on the invisible intervention, like 3.0, like the updated version, and I'm not even sure I'm gonna keep the whole craft method part in there. I probably will, but there's just a lot more in there specifically about communication techniques and skills training and stuff like that. So, I think invisible intervention would be a good next step for you. Um, the membership, the group sessions will help you if you want that. It'll help you to apply it. So it's a fairly like inexpensive way to be able to drop in like each week. Kim and Campbell are on there doing group coaching, so you can stop and you can jump on like it's kind of like a Zoom call. You can jump on the Zoom call and say, "Hey, here's my situation. What should I do?" Or you can leave your question early and make sure it gets answered and stuff like that. So um, I would say invisible intervention, and you may want to add on just, for a little while so you can have that support in applying it. But good for you. You've read the book, you've got your head on straight. Now it's time to do the work. Um, do you know any secular resources around enabling or boundaries? I have found all I have found needs a higher power to work. Um, I know that I mean, I have an entire playlist on here about boundaries, and none of that involves higher power. Most any counselor, um, can deal with boundaries, codependency, enabling, and that kind of stuff, and they don't necessarily work from a religious perspective. So, um, I think there's probably plenty of resources. As far as, like, support groups go, um, there's a lot of, like, look for, a codependency support group that's ran by a counselor, because usually it's not as, steeped in religion unless they're like a Christian counselor or something like that. I hope that helps. There's also Smart Recovery, and there's Smart Recovery for family members. That's another one you might wanna look into. Let's see here. Robert says, "Question: My, AW, I think that means alcoholic wife, has used alcohol for coping till over 40 years. Is there a way I can suggest other ways for her to cope without alcohol? I know I can't control her, but how do I get her to," basically, I think you're saying, "How do I get her to see that it's the problem?" The issue is that any other coping skill that you might suggest isn't going to do the job as quick or as fast as alcohol, so it's hard to compete as far as a coping skill is concerned. What you probably wanna focus on instead, and I don't want you to do this directly, you gotta do this indirectly, Robert, but you gotta get her to see that the coping skill she's using, yes, maybe helps solve that problem a little bit, but is causing a lot more other problems. Kinda like when you take a medicine for one thing, but it causes way more side effects and problems than it's worth. That's what you really wanna get her to see. Not You don't wanna just say, "Hey, there's other skills, other things over here you could use." You basically wanna get her to see that this alcohol is causing more problems than it's helping. Tracy says, "So, do you get the addicted wait, so how do you get a person addicted to weed to see that they are addicted?" Um, I think it's difficult. One of the ways that people can see usually is that I find when I deal with people addicted to weed, they're usually pretty depressed and their anxiety's getting worse and worse. Now they think that the the weed is the only thing that helps with the depression or the anxiety, but one of the questions that I ask is your anxiety and depression better or worse than when you first started? And it is always worse. Um, and so a lot of times when you frame it that way, they can see that it's actually making them feel worse and worse and worse. It just happens so slowly that they don't realize necessarily that that is what is going on. Sometimes they realize that they're not as productive as they wanna be, and then they realize that that is hurting their self-esteem and self-confidence, so that's another inroad that those are the things that people are most likely to recognize as far as, like, the negative consequences of that particular addiction. How or why does an alcoholic man, when sober, is the nicest person, loving, hardworking? Once he starts drinking, his nastiness starts, sleeping, punching, sheer utter hatred of you. There's some science behind that. The science behind that is alcohol is a depressant, so your brain starts to try to counteract all of that alcohol by producing the opposite brain chemical. So alcohol triggers GABA, which is kind of a mellow chemical. So your brain is counteracting it by producing a lot of glutamate, which is an excitatory, anxious, jittery, keyed up kind of feeling. And so, neurobiologically, they get in that state. A lot of that's why people sometimes get like angry and want to fight when they're drinking. It's because initially it's like, yes, it calms them down, and then it does the opposite. It's because their brain is trying to keep them in homeostasis. It's trying to keep them alive. So it's pouring in the opposite chemical. That's part of it. And then the other part of it is because alcohol turns off your frontal lobe, which is your filter. So if you're a nice guy, all that bad crap, all your stuff, like normally you would suppress everything and hold it in and be Mr. Nice Guy. And it's like there's no suppression now. The gate is wide open. It doesn't mean that they actually believe and feel the things they say when they're intoxicated. Because sometimes people say that they say, oh, they're speaking the truth now. Not really, because when all those that glutamate and all those other brain chemicals are all jacked up, they feel they think and feel very differently about everything in their life. So yeah, they're thinking and feeling it at that moment, but it's because their brain chemicals are all jacked up. Kind of like think about like when you see women who have like postpartum depression, and sometimes they have like, I don't want to be a mom and I want to run away. Is that how they really feel? Probably not, but the brain chemicals are so wreaking havoc with them that's making them feel that in the moment. But it's not how they would feel normally if that problem wasn't happening. Let's see. Joanna says, "It seems that we have always been taught that weed isn't addictive." I think it is too. Yes, it definitely is. I do feel like these days more and more people are recognizing, like 10 years ago, teenagers would tell me that all the time, "It's not addictive, you can't get chemically dependent." I feel like now, because it's so many more people are addicted to it and it's so easy to get, and they're using it in so much more concentrated forms, like all day, every day. I think a lot of people are come to terms with the fact that it's addictive. Now they may say, well, it's addictive, but it's harmless. They may try to minimize the negativity of being addicted to it, but I do think more people realize that now, because people are like literally using it in those vape pens all day, every day. Like they know they're addicted now. Let's see. Shristi says, my addicted loved one used to drink heavily almost every day for the past 2 years. Since the past 2 months, something has shifted in him. He has stopped drinking. He has lapped twice, but is taking good action steps. He has joined a gym and he goes during the evening, his usual binging time. Both the slip ups happened when he was having bad headaches. How do I help him? He has been so honest and open with me. First of all, I want to say good job to you, Tristy, because I've been seeing your name on this channel, on these lives for a long time. And I know that you are part of the reason why he is figuring it out. So I'm so proud of you. So I just want to say that first and foremost. The headache thing, the thing I'm thinking there, people are more prone to relapse when they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And I would also put in pain there, because it wears down your resiliency. It's like it takes your willpower tank and depletes it immediately. It's kind of like when you're in pain, you're grumpy, you're irritable, you're mean, you're not in a good mood. What that's a symptom of is your willpower tank being depleted. So helping someone get more comfortable, even get them something to eat, let them rest, will actually help them feel better. Kind of like when you're really hungry and you're mean and you're irritable, and all your willpower's gone and you don't care about being nice to people. It's that same sort of thing. So I think it falls into that hungry, angry, lonely, tired thing. So if there's something that he knows causes the headaches, you could maybe even preempt it. Is it because he's blood sugar's low? Is it because he's staring at the computer screen too long? Like, is there something that's causing that? And you might could look at trying to like prevent that or deal with the headaches early on or have a headache emergency like evacuation plan, like what to do. Okay, here's what we're going to do when that happens. But basically, it's like he runs out of energy to resist when he's in pain. That's what's happening. But I'm impressed with both of you. I think that's great. You're doing awesome. Quick question. I followed your advice and got the person I'm dating to start recovery. Nice, impressive. But now he feels a bit detached and disengaging from our relationship and asking for some space. Is that normal? Um, it's not abnormal, and I don't know if his saying space is about, like, the relationship stuff, like, as in, like, the dating part, or is in the part of, like or if it's, like, "Back off of me, let me do my own recovery." I don't know what it's I don't know what it could be either way, I guess I could say. Let's see. Can you please talk about dry drunks? My husband has stopped drinking for 1 year and 6 months by, um, but refuses to go to treatment. He's tried AA for 3 months. His sister has died 7 months ago. He now wants a divorce. I'm I used to use the word dry drunk more frequently, but I've kinda stopped using it because sometimes I feel like when someone gets sober, everything they do that the family or someone else doesn't like, they're calling dry drunk when it could just be a personality trait. It could just be another problem. So I'm a little leery of the word dry drunk. If you've never heard of that term, it's an old recovery term that basically means someone maybe got sober, but they didn't fix anything inside. So they're still sort of miserable person on the inside. Um, And then some people think you're a dry drunk if you got sober and you didn't go to 12-step. They'll say you're dry drunk just for that, or you're a dry drunk just because you didn't go to treatment or something like that. But I don't necessarily agree with that completely. So I would need to know a little bit more about your situation to give you more specific advice. Like what kind of behaviors are you seeing, Adeline, that are you're calling dry? Like what's going on? I know you're saying he's wanting a divorce, but what else is happening there? And then I would be able to give you more specific kind of information. That's a good question, like being in the family recovery membership would be, because you get on live with the counselors and say these things so you can get better feedback. Let's see here. You're welcome, Trusty. All right, everybody, we are about to run out of time. Thank you, thank you, thank you for everyone who joined live, and for those of you who are watching the playback, we appreciate you too. I will see you guys next Thursday at 1 as always, and we release new videos on Tuesday mornings. And of course, there are always resources in the description. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.